clarify up until where we've been. So now remember, bearing in mind that there are a few dimensions to learning. We are learning this in memory of Mark Waden, whose neshama went up last year, the 26th of Nisan. He immigrated up on high, and he was a man who, in many ways, was an embodiment of Pirkei Avos, for my father-in-law. But the truth of the matter is, when there's a pandemic in the city, one of the ways to push away a pandemic is to make Torah go viral. So let's recap what we learned until now. The very first
Sorry,
mission.
Rabbi, they're saying that it's asking them for a passcode. Is there a meeting passcode? Shouldn't be, hey?
You have a look. Maybe they created a new one. I don't know. Hold on. Let's have a look. I don't
It
like it.
didn't ask me.
So it could be. Just let them try. Hold on. I think there are new rules with Zoom. Hold on. Okay, passcode is 770, 770. Passcode is 770.
Let's see if they can get in.
So I'll tell you why that's better, passcode. It's just simply for a future, because otherwise I keep stopping and starting.
Yes.
I think that's why they did it. I think they've done it across the board and all of that stuff.
Okay.
770.
Okay, yeah, it's letting them in. That's why. Okay. Yeah.
Good. What we're going to do is we're going to
Very
use this,
interesting.
just to catch up where we are. And please God, we should make Torah go viral. And as a result of that, it should push away this terrible pandemic. Remember the
Nice.
different ways of learning. One of the ways of learning is we're trying to take the tools out of this to help us transform our life. And going back in the very first Mishnah we learned that Moses got the Torah from Sinai and passed it on to Joshua, Joshua to the elders to the prophets gave it to the men of the Great Assembly. And what I told you that is a 5-step program of how to change your life. Without elaborating too much, you need humility of Moses. You need absolute perseverance and determination of Joshua. You need to be in life, if you want to transform your life, you always need to see the bigger picture. An intelligent person who's not wise can cause a lot of trouble. A wise person, if they're having a banquet at home and somebody spills all over the table, he's wise enough not to make a scene. Just leave it, else you're going to muck up the whole function. The prophet sees the unintended consequence. He sees what's going to come out of that. That if there is screaming at the table, everybody's going to walk out and never come back. He sees what's going to happen in the future. And the men of the Great Assembly are those people who make a difference. And that, we said, is the most important thing in life. Because if you have all the knowledge and all the wealth and you're not sharing it, you're not great. Great is when you make a difference in life. So the first Mishnah told us about how you can transform your life. And at any age, by the way, at any age, if you wake up one day on this Monday morning, the 5th of Shvat, so I want to change my life, that is the 5-step program. Humility, I've got to listen, I've got to understand that there's a bigger thing than me. I've got to just be focused on what I want to achieve, and with perseverance do it. See the bigger picture, see the unintended consequence, and go make a difference. That's my life. I'm going to get it right. The second Mishnah was from Shimon HaTzadik. He was the last of the men of the Great Assembly. And he put things very clearly. He says, now that you've got this 5-step program to change your life, I want you to know that the world stands on 3 pillars: Torah, sacrifice, and acts of goodness and kindness. Now that sounds so simple. But the truth of the matter is it's ingenious. What does that mean? God created this world for Torah to be learnt. When Torah is learnt in this world, godliness comes from the heavens all the way through to this physical world. So if you want godliness to come into this world, if you want heaven to marry earth, which was the original part of creation, I don't know if we mentioned before, when God created the world, if Adam and Eve wouldn't have sinned, heaven would have descended on earth immediately, and for the rest, we would always just gone higher and higher in spirituality. Now that might sound a bit absurd, but the truth of the matter is what we know of the galaxies until now is nothing. And it's much more exciting than this world. So because Adam and Eve sinned, we've got to wait for that until Mashiach comes. But in the meantime, when we learn Torah, we bring heaven into this world. We're bringing the highest level of heaven into this world where there's no more sickness, there's no more suffering, and just exploring the most amazing godliness. I often use the analogy, if you would have walked over to a kid 300 years ago and said, one day you're going to have a little black instrument, and all you're going to want to do is look at it and play in it and download the world, he would have looked at you as if absurd. Today, in a little black machine, you can download the world, or part of the world. It's not 3D yet. That's what Torah does. What does prayer do or sacrifice? It lifts up the physical world. So by me learning Torah, I'm allowing God to be intimate with me. By me praying, I'm being intimate with God. And by acts of goodness and kindness, the right and the left, I'm allowing God to hug me, and I'm bringing godliness into this world. Those are the three pillars with which the world stands on. So you've got to get that right. You've got to have a program every day. Am I praying to God? Am I allowing God to kiss me through Torah? And am I emulating God? Am I doing acts of goodness and kindness, which brings godliness, into this world? By the way, it was just to give you the timeline when all this happened. We are catching up today, so at the risk of boring you, I'm just going to give you the timeline. God created the world 5,781 years ago. For the year 2448, it's 2,000 something years afterwards, God, the Jewish people went to Egypt, and 2448, they left Egypt. 40 years later, 2488, 3,000 something years ago, God took the Jewish people into Egypt, into Israel. They then wandered in Israel for a while. Eventually, King David and King Solomon built the first temple, and there are a whole bunch of prophets, and there's a whole bunch of kings. Good. Jews get naughty, so this is about 2,500 years ago. The Jews get naughty, and God sends them into Babylon. The Babylonian king, Nebuchadnezzar, destroys the first temple, and he takes the Jews into Babylon. 10 years before he destroyed the temple, he took Samson and a whole bunch of other leaders. They were young at the time. He took them into Babylon, and they became very successful in Babylon. Anyways, that was 10 years before the destruction. Then comes the destruction of the temple. It's like 2,500 years ago. Comes the destruction of the temple, and the Jews are in Babylon. Shortly after that, Nebuchadnezzar, the infamous Nebuchadnezzar, who destroyed the first temple, he gets beaten by one of the kings who beat him is King Cyrus of Persia. This is before the Purim story. King Cyrus, and if you ever want to speak about a Jew-loving king, we speak about King Cyrus. He was the one, I think the original is still intact, by the way. I think Persia has it. Iran has it. He was the one who signed the document that the Jews could go back and rebuild the temple. And he allowed the Jews to go back to rebuild the temple. Very few Jews went, funny enough. Like 40,000 Jews went. And anyway, some Jews came to Israel, and things were very difficult, and there was a lot of ignorance. And the Jews who did go intermarried, and there was poverty-stricken, etc., etc. Anyways, there was a group of people living in Israel at the time called the Samaritans. And they came there. They were there from the time of the first temple. Very problematic people. They fought with the Jewish people, and they sent message to Cyrus that although you've allowed the Jews to build the second temple, they're going to rebel against you. King Cyrus heard that. He got nervous, and he put a stop to the building of the temple. Shortly after that, Ahasuerus comes to power. Cyrus dies. Ahasuerus comes to power, and then is the Purim story. Straight after the Purim, so it's about 27 years afterwards now. Straight after that, Esther has a son with Ahasuerus. His name is Darius. Darius is Jewish, and he allows the Jews to go back to rebuild the second temple. That is the men of the Great Assembly. The man who comes back at that time was a man by the name of Ezra. Ezra didn't go before because his teacher was still alive, and he didn't want to leave his teacher in Babylon. Ezra comes back, and he really is the main key of the men of the Great Assembly, which we keep speaking about. The final step of the first mission of the men of the Great Assembly was led by Ezra. They made our Shmona Esra like we have it. They put in Kiddush, they put in Havdalah. They made like the Old Testament, the 24 books of Tanakh. They put all that in order. They really saved the day for the Jewish people. That was the men of the Great Assembly headed by Ezra. Ezra died, and afterwards, the last of the men of the Great Assembly was none other than Shimon HaTzadik, who we just spoke about. Now, what's interesting about Shimon HaTzadik, he was the one who met Alexander the Great. So it's about 325 years BCE on the 25th of Tavis, 325 years BCE. So let's say it's about 350 years ago, 2,300 years ago, he meets Alexander the Great. Because actually what happened was Alexander's father Philip, who came from Macedonia, destroyed the Greeks. Then he destroyed, he beats the Persian Empire, and the Greeks become the dominant feature of the world. And he's very young at the time. I think he's in his early 20s. And he's on his way to take over Israel. He's met by the Samaritans, and they're going to help him destroy the temple. While he's on his way to destroy the temple, he meets Shimon HaTzadik. Shimon HaTzadik, the Gemara says that Shimon HaTzadik heard he was coming. He put on his priestly garments because he was a Kohen Gadol, and they go and meet, and he says, where are you going? He says, I'm going to destroy your temple. King Alexander the Great jumps off his horse and he bows to Shimon HaTzadik. His generals say, why are you bowing to the Jew? He says, whenever I went out to battle, I see a vision of a very holy man. This is the man I've been seeing. He says, how can I help you? He says, you're coming to destroy our temple. Shimon HaTzadik says, please don't do that. And he says, okay, absolutely not. I won't do that. And then he kills the Samaritans who were with him. Later on, he asked Shimon HaTzadik to put, because he was so good to the Jews, to put a statue of him in the temple. The temple was already built. And then Shimon HaTzadik said to him, that wouldn't be right to put a statue of you in a holy temple, but what we will do, any Kohen that's born in this year will be named Alexander, and that's why you have the Jewish name Alexander. That was at the time of Shimon HaTzadik. Then, by the way, after this is when you have the Ptolemies coming into power, and don't think when you read these stories of the sages, times were very, 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 very turbulent. And straight after that, after Shimon HaTzadik, funny enough, Shimon HaTzadik had two sons. One was Chonya and one was Shimi. He wanted Chonya to become the Kohen Gadol after him. There was a big fight. Chonya ran to Egypt, built a temple there. He wasn't supposed to build a temple there, but nonetheless he did. That was Shimon HaTzadik's sons. The one who led after him was Antigonus Ish Soicha. And let's follow the flow. What did Antigonus Ish Soicha say? He said, you've got to get to a level in life where you don't serve God because of reward and punishment. He's not telling you how to serve God. Of course, when you start off, you want to train a kid to be rewarded for good and be punished for bad. But eventually, you've got to mature. Eventually, you've got to fall in love with God. You've got to serve God, not because of anything, but because you love God. You think about God, that God is your creator, is your Father in heaven. You fall in love with God. Don't do it for reward. Have a much more mature relationship with God. You've got to have love and you've got to have fear. You've got to have two wings that drive you. The wing of love and the wing of fear. It's got to be transcend reward and punishment. We're so scared of God. God, you there, I'm here, don't notice me, please, I'll just do anything, but don't punish. He said, you've got to get beyond that, fall in love, have a mature relationship with God. Tragically, two students misunderstood what he said, and they thought he said, live in the here and now. And another religion started called the Tzaddukim, but we'll come back to that later. After Antigonus Ish Soicha speaks about yourself, so Shimon HaTzadik speaks about the three pillars for the world. Those are the three pillars that you have to have Torah, you have to have service of God, and you have to have active goodness and kindness. Shimon HaTzadik says how you have to develop. You have to develop where you have a relationship with God that transcends reward and punishment. Now, the two people who take over after Antigonus Ish Soicha are the two Yossis. And they speak about ambience in the home. Now we're speaking about the home. And what is ambience in the home? If you live far away, it's all about the ambience in your home. If you live in Yerushalayim, you have to be kind. After that, we learn how you deal with your friends. So it starts with you. Antigonus Ish Soicha is about you. Then it's about your home. And then it's about your friends and acquaintances. And Yeshua ben Parachia says you've got to have a good friend. You've got to have a good friend. And Nitar Bailey says, but keep away from a bad neighbor. So you see, they're speaking about people close to you. Then the Mishnah speaks about the world at large, and it addresses judges. That judges how you address the world at large. So it starts with the human being, starts with the ambience in the house, your close friends, and now we're dealing with how a judge has to deal with the people. That's where we got to. Then, after dealing with that, we're just talking about other stuff in life. And the two leaders who took over after Shimon ben Shotach and Yehuda ben Tabai was Shmaya v'Avtalyon. Shmaya v'Avtalyon were two converts, or they came from converted families, and they rose up to very high office. And they give you such good advice. Love work and love your work. Because if you love work, you know what's going to happen? It's going to keep you on the straight and narrow. But we discussed that already. And also you've got to be so careful with what you say, because if you're not careful with what you say, even though you mean it in all innocence, people can take wrong what you're saying. Who was he referring to? He was referring to when Avtalyon says, be careful with what you're saying, because people might misunderstand it. He was speaking about Antigonus Shoicha, who said, "Don't serve God for reward." Two of his students went a bit meshuggah and misunderstood it, and they really thought that he meant that there was no life after death. And they started this whole religion where you live in the here and now, you don't worry about life after death. And they came to haunt the Jewish people, by the way. From then on, Abtalion, realizing the mistake that Antigonus Shoicha's words led to, he said, "Be very careful with your words." And it's a down-to-earth lesson for all of us. Now I think we learned this as well. Then we went on to Hillel. Now, so we're going sage by sage by sage who kept Judaism alive. And Hillel and Shammai were the two sages who took place after them. Up until now, by the way, you don't have argument in Jewish law. From now, you start having a lot of argument in Jewish law. Hillel and Shammai were the two sages who took over after Shmaya Bavtalion. Hillel said, "Be of the students of Aaron, love peace." He has down-to-earth lessons. Love peace. There's some people that love belligerency. They walk into a restaurant, they're never happy. It's got to be belligerent. The food is undercooked, it's overcooked, there's no salt. They're always fighting about something. They're never quite happy with the seat on the plane. They're never quite happy with the seat at the function. They're always belligerent. Just don't do like that. Just love peace. Not only love peace, but also pursue peace. There doesn't always have to be a drama. And when you see people, and I think it applies to non-Jews as well, be the first to greet people. Be the first to uplift people, Jew or non-Jew. Uplift them to the Torah. What does it mean, uplift to them Torah? There's a way a non-Jew has to behave, a way a Jew has to behave. But don't think yourself better than anybody else. Your job, if you met somebody in life, it's by absolute divine providence you met them. Why are you meeting them? To uplift them. And then he says like this, and if you're talking about lifting them up to the Torah, you've got to know as follows. By being good, there are two types of being good. Some people do good only to make a name for themselves. He says, I promise you, if that's what you are in life, you're going to be good, but eventually you're going to lose your name. You know why? Because if it doesn't suit you and good is needed to be done, you're going to run for the forests. And you know what that means? People are going to see through you and do things for the right things. Okay, this is where we're going to start from. You're Dalit. That's a good place to start, even if we've learned it before. You're Dalit. Can I keep you 5 more? Oh, it's only 9:20. Okay, good. Who are you, Amen? Now, Hillel used to say as follows. Hillel becomes the most amazing leader of the Jewish people. And who are you, Amen? He used to say like this. Im ein ani li. It comes the 5th of Shvat. And I want to transform my life. I am sick and tired of mucking up my life. I want to get it right. Where do I start? It says, Im ein ani li. If I'm not for myself, if I don't have a program where I better myself every day. Now, I want to clarify that. In buying a house, if you want to buy a house in a beautiful area, don't worry that every room is debilitated, every room needs renovation. Just have a program. This year I'm doing the kitchen. Next year I'm doing the main bedroom. The following year I'm doing this room and that room. And eventually I'm going to have it. If you can live like that I'm busy renovating, you're always busy making your house. If somebody comes in and walks into your house, and even though the toilet looks a disaster and the bathroom looks and the kitchen looks a disaster, you're at home with it because you know you have a plan. It's if you don't have a plan that you're apologizing. Oh, I'm sorry for this, I'm sorry for that. If you have a plan, you see the end result. You see this house as an absolute edifice, a mansion. Now, it's the same thing with one's own life. A person has to sit down, maybe with a mashpia, maybe with a teacher, maybe by oneself, and just think through, just what do I have to get life right in life? And take 1 or 2 things this year, renovate them, and you'll see very quickly everything else gets renovated. But it's not a one-day game. And that's what he said, Im ein ani li. If it's not for me, if I'm not for myself, if I don't have a program to take care of myself, if I'm squandering all my money and helping everybody else, it's not good for me. I've got to have a program that works on me. But if I'm only for myself, if I'm totally absorbed in my little bubble, ma'ani, what am I? And Hillel is giving the best advice for life. You're going to have time for everybody else. You're going to have time for yourself. And when do we start with this program? When do I start this program? Im lo achshav ein mosai. It's like the person who says, I have to start a diet. I'm starting next Tuesday, next Wednesday. Tuesday comes, they're starting the following Thursday. I'm starting today. But today is the worst time to start because it's raining. I'm starting today. And Hillel gives you the best part of life to transform your life. I don't think of a more important Mishnah of self-transformation. It has to be good for yourself, good for others, and at the same time, you start immediately. Now, Shammai comes along And Shammah was very different to Hillel, by the way. Shammah was a very stern man. Hillel was a very open man. Now you can't, not one is right and one is wrong. Just the character. If you put infrared glasses on, you will see that we all have a soul within us. And that soul is made up of 7 emotions. One of the emotions is love. If your dominant emotion is love and kindness, you'll be much more relaxed with people. If your dominant energy is severity and strictness, you're not going to have patience for nonsense. You won't take fools lightly. Shammai's dominant character was strictness, and therefore mostly all his rulings were strict. Now look now. He's giving us advice for life, and he says like this: Asay Torascha Kvar. We learned before in the second Mishnah that one of the pillars of this world is bringing Torah into this world. We can't understand, we can't spend time explaining how important it is. You cannot overemphasize it. There is nothing more important than bringing Torah into the world. Bringing Torah into the world blinds the eyes of the evil. It pushes away evil decrees. I want to ask you something. In 1948, 56, 67, 73 war, in Tebi, 1981 the Iraq. Don't you think the Jews had a bit of muzzle there? What's that muzzle? That muzzle, the Gemara says, comes back from King David. King David told his general, you fight the army, I'll learn, the muzzle of the Torah will help. If you see things around you are wrong, just increase a little bit in learning Torah. Can push away a little bit of Torah and prayer. And therefore Shammah says, don't look at Torah, don't flirt with Torah. You know, we live in a world today that things are so easy to come by and so easy to drop. I imagine 200 years ago, there was no such thing as a disposable. But it was I think about 110 years ago, the Wilkinson, whoever it was, Remington, he invented the disposable blade, which made it a lot easier for men to shave, not that Chabad ever bought into it. You threw away the blade afterwards, you didn't have to sharpen it. Jump forward, when I was a kid, nappies were not disposable. If a person tore his socks, they sewed the socks. If your kettle was broken, you sent it to be fixed. Now, for good reason, these things have gone away. But one of the tragedies is that things became disposable. It's easy, I can just replace it. Relationships became disposable. Everything becomes disposable. And that's a terrible thing. My learning becomes disposable. I can now, because of modern electronics, I can now drive to work, eat a sandwich, listen to a shir, do a billion different things, half concentrating. He didn't like that. He says, Asay Torascha Keva, make your Torah permanent, which means a few things. Number one, it means it should be your primary aim in life, according to him. Doesn't mean you have to learn it all day, but that's your primary goal is spirituality. Number two, it means when you do learn Torah, it has to have a set time. 9:30 to 10, 9:30 to 9 to 9:30. We don't play with it. Strict. Don't play with it. Don't walk in when you want. That's two. Number three, Asay Torascha Kvar, when you are learning, you have to be totally absorbed in that learning. You have to be totally absorbed in the moment. The biggest problem today, by the way, is that people aren't absorbed in the moment, which means to say we're like Windows. We're doing 15 billion things at once. That's not one thing. Anybody who met the Lubavitcher Rebbe, when the Rebbe spoke to you, whether it be for 5 minutes or for 1 minute, you could see that his entire essence was on you. He wasn't looking around being distracted. He was totally focused on the person. And that's what it means. And you'll be surprised, by the way, when you have focused attention, when you're able to focus your being on something, you'll learn it 100 times more. The biggest problem today, we're busy soothing our kid, watching a video, darning side or whatever we do. We're doing 15 million things at once. And it's a tragedy that. I'm telling you, it's a tragedy. Asay Torascha Kvar means teach yourself to have focused attention. And as a result of that, Emon Ma'at, teach yourself. In learning Torah, teach yourself to speak little, Ba'asa Harbe. In other words, the learning's not the main thing, it's putting it into practice. And don't be a person who over-promises and under-delivers. If you're flirting with things, if you're a flirtatious person, you're promising, you deliver nothing. He didn't like that. He said, speak little and do a lot. And here are the key words. We're going to end with this today, if we don't have time. Behavior. Makabel is kol ha'od m'seiv upon yofis. Receive everybody nicely. Now, that seems so simple. Receive everybody nicely. Receive everybody with a cheerful countenance. Now, it is ingenious. Why is it ingenious? Because you could all argue, well, we all could have written that. Now, the truth of the matter is, most of us, we're not like that. If we're in a bad mood, boy, do people know we're in a bad mood. Why is it so important from Shammai? Because Shammai's nature was not to have a cheerful countenance. What does that mean? As I said to you at the beginning, he was a strict person. He didn't take fools lightly. He had no patience for people. So a ger came to see him, a convert came to see him and said, please convert me, teach me the whole Torah while standing on one foot. And Shammai said, out of here. He took a ruler and he chucked him out. Didn't hit him, he just took a ruler and said, no, stupid question, out of here. The same person went to Hillel, and Hillel has a much broader mind and loved all creatures and uplifted them. He found an answer for him. And that taught something to Shammai. So the genius is this, that Shammai changed his whole life when he saw how Hillel behaved. That even though it's not my nature to be like that, if somebody is standing in front of me, I've got to make them feel like a king. I've got to make them feel so good. I've got to uplift them. You know why? Because every single thing that happens in life happens with absolute divine providence. And if Hashem wanted this person to stand in front of me and I can cheer them, I can uplift them, I can make them happy, well, then I've achieved what I've achieved. But I don't feel like that inside. That doesn't matter. Why? Why did Hillel teach it and why did Shammai? So what we learn from Shammai is that no matter what age you are, you can always change your way. You can always become what you're not. And that's not being false, by the way. It's only being false if you're doing things, but if something's right to do, you force yourself to do it and eventually enjoy doing it. Why is it so important? It all depends how you see the person walking in the street. If the person walking in the street is bacteria, then you might as well just kick him. But if the person walking in the street is a godly soul, there's a soul in that human being. And if there's a soul, I've got to respect it. And I've got to thank God that I've been blessed, that I have a few rand in my pocket that I can give that person. Wow, therefore, when I see that person, I should be smiling that I can help that person because I'm seeing the God. And not only that, you'll see it later, it'll come back in the Mishnah, by me giving charity makes peace. Why does it make peace? Because that person that is not at peace with God. But when that person sees that I've been an emissary from God to give him a bit of bucks and to uplift him with a kind word, wow, I make peace not only between me and God, not only between me and the world, not only between me and him, but between him and God. And therefore, what I want to take away from, as we've started learning again, the Mishnahs that what we have to take away is we can honestly change the world around us by looking at everything with absolute divine providence and where can I uplift the world. It's not our job to criticize the world, it's our job to uplift the world. May we all do that. Have a good week, and I will see you all next Monday. We will go further.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers, guys.
Your darling.